Hey folks, this is The Constant Show where we talk about movies, and I am Constant, a gentleman and a scholar. And this week we will be discussing the 2004 action movie Cradle to the Grave, starring DMX and Jet Li. The basic premise is that DMX is a jewel thief who stole some diamonds that Jet Li came over from China to recover, and our villain intends to use for nefarious purposes. But I struggle to call anything about Cradle to the Grave basic. It's this non-stop thrill ride that starts as soon as we meet the characters. We first meet DMX, he freezes a bank, and then he uses a bazooka to shoot it open, and then narrowly avoids getting hit by a train. So within the first 5 minutes of knowing this character, we got a whole journey already. And Jet Li's introduction is pretty much the same. He's parkouring down the side of a building so he can get inside and martial arts some information out of a guy. Almost everything that you could possibly want from an action movie is here. It's got a train scene, it's got a car chase scene, there's an ATV scene, there's parkour, there's multiple martial arts fights, explosions, Gabrielle Union, and cage fighting. Usually there's 2 or 3 of these things happening simultaneously as the camera is cutting from one to the next to the other. And because of it, it can establish this tempo that's positively breathtaking. One of the reviews that I saw prior to making my video about it talked about how it's a martial arts movie that never really delivers on the martial arts. And I think this is kind of true in a sense, but in another, it's also not. I feel like a lot of what would be taken up by martial arts scenes is just other characters having the ability to shine or do stuff in the plot. And it's interesting the way in which it incorporates martial arts as a skill in an isolated environment while recognizing that there are other skills that are applicable in different circumstances. And when the martial arts do show up, it usually serves a connected purpose to the plot, like a lot of the fights in it have meaning or are interesting in a unique way. For example, there's one fight where a character is trying to protect somebody and the movements that he uses are efficient, like you would see in martial arts, but the focus of the scene isn't mano-a-mano combat, it's this guy protecting somebody else. Another really good example of this being a martial arts movie that kind of isn't a martial arts movie is in Jet Li's fight with the mini-boss. So if we look at another example of Jet Li fighting the mini-boss in one of his movies, in Kiss of the Dragon, he fights this guy in a restaurant, and it's this big hulking guy who's so strong that even Jet Li can't hurt him with his kicks and punches. So he has to wear him down, and it's the same kind of story in Ip Man when he fights Twister, where you have a bigger, stronger opponent, so you have to isolate weaknesses and then create them and sort of wear them down. In this one, though, Jet Li uses a cheap shot so that he can just escape the fight entirely. In a martial arts movie, it would seem weird for our character to back down from the challenge, but in this movie it kind of makes sense because every time we see Jet Li use martial arts throughout the movie, it's as a means to an end. A really good example of this is in his first fight scene. Whenever he is going for the bag, he gets into this position where he can hit the guy with a pipe. And normally in a martial arts movie, you go for the karate chop, the finisher. But in this one, he uses the pipe to snatch the bag, which kind of shows us the character of Jet Li's character in this. He's the kind of person who's mission focused. The fight is just completely irrelevant to him. This whole movie, he just wants his diamonds. That's his goal, and it's demonstrated in his every interaction with the plot and the characters and his environment. One of the really interesting things that Cradle to the Grave does is it establishes these very easy to read characters who are demonstrated in their first scenes. I talked a little bit about Jet Li's, but DMX also has some shining moments from his first heist. So during the heist, it's an elaborate, well-planned out thing. You don't just happen into bazooka opening a safe. That's part of the strategy, right? At the same time, his strategy involves these unnecessary risks and complications. And later on in the train scene, he actually loses his bag of gems and doesn't even waste a thought thinking about it because his friend is in jeopardy. These 2 scenes back to back tell us a lot about DMX's character. He's smart, but he's also rash. It's not so much about the loot as it is the thrill seeking. For a lot of action movies, we tend to excuse dumb cool action stuff for happening just because it's cool to see it, right? In this one, all the action scenes serve a purpose. Another really good example is whenever Jet Li and DMX start the movie, they're like opposed. Whenever DMX and Jet Li work together, they actually establish that bond in a fight scene where they're both fighting a shared enemy separately. But during the fight, they start to realize that they're kind of on the same team here, and the fight ends with them just giving each other a nod. In and of itself would seem like a minor character development, but due to the fact it's established throughout this fight scene how we can see them slowly starting to work together more and more until you get to that nod and it just feels so well earned, to where the characters don't need to stop and have a speech of, oh yeah, we've bonded now. We can just go directly into the next action sequence, which ideally is what these movies should be like. Action sequence and action sequence, as streamlined and as smooth as possible. So there's this concept called plot economy, right? And the basic idea is during a movie, you only have the runtime, right? And during that runtime, you have the characters that you have the settings that you have, right? And how can you extract the most value out of each of those individual elements? So if I was telling you a story and I was like, two guys are walking down the street, right? And then if I add their brothers, suddenly the story is recontextualized. By details, there's a new depth or dimension to our understanding of that topic than there wouldn't be otherwise. And when it comes to plot economy, there aren't many movies that can actually stand up to Cradle to the Grave. A few quick examples to demonstrate what I mean by that. So every character in the story gets multiple instances to shine. Anthony Anderson, who in any other movie would just be comic relief, also serves the purpose of social manipulator, usually being the part of the criminal syndicate that interacts with the security or the front guard or whatever. Gabrielle Union is not only Gabrielle Union, but she's also a badass jewel thief and a martial artist. The hostage, which in any other movie would just be like literally a plot device. You could have a hostage in a movie not have a single line. In this one, it's a 12-year-old girl. Over the course of the movie, she makes multiple escape attempts. And it's not just like simple things like she tries to run away. At one point, she pickpockets this guy so she can get the keys to the van and then tries to drive off and actually makes it through the building a decent part before running into stuff. At another point, she kicks out the window of the van. And this is somebody whose role in the plot is to just be the motivation, right? But even in that, Cradle to the Grave doesn't waste the character spot on just a blank slate who's going to be rescued. She was rescuing herself. You give that little girl a couple of days, she's already going to be out of there. The diamonds, which in any other movie would just be a glowing suitcase or some shiny rocks. In this one, they actually serve a narrative purpose and drive a lot of the conflict that you don't realize early on in the movie. And I'm not going to tell you the secrets of that because you should go watch this movie because it's really good. That's what this whole video is about. In a genre where you normally only get to know the motivations, the depth, the personality of the hero and the villain, Cradle to the Grave takes the time to develop each and every one of its characters into competent components of the plot. There's a character who's in this movie for literally 2 scenes. I know his backstory, I know his relationship with one of the main characters, I have a general idea of who this guy is as a person. And I think that's why this movie didn't end up being a martial arts movie. Because to do so would be to give Jet Li's character a greater part of the plot than he actually encompasses. Instead, each and every character gets their own moment to shine. Instead of being like Batman and Friends, this is like the Justice League. This is like a Fast and the Furious with like 8 Vin Diesels in it. Cradle to the Grave is great if you meet it where it's at, which is the realism level somewhere between Ocean's 11 and Netflix's Daredevil, but as good of a ride as, Sharpie in a bathroom or The Boss from Six Flags. You should go watch it and give it a shot because I think it's pretty good. And DMX did like most of the soundtrack. It's like 9 DMX songs on there. It's wonderful. But that's been the movie. Those were my thoughts. Have you seen it? What were your takeaways? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Are you going to go rewatch it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And you can watch it on Netflix. Like, comment, subscribe.